that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewbs, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
you can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, it's 6 p.m. That means it's time for Dewbs & Co. I will be keeping the seat warm for Michelle for the next couple of evenings. Now, of course, we've just heard the very tragic news that the body discovered in the River Wye yesterday is, in fact, that of mother Nicola Bulley. 3 and a bit weeks after she disappeared. Very sad news. We will, of course, be bringing you the very latest on that. But, of course, as every evening on Dewbs & Co., we want to get stuck into the big political questions of the week, of the day. I want to ask you whether you think it's time now for an annual cap on the number of refugees allowed into Britain. I think it's pretty clear that the status quo cannot go on as it is. I'm asking this because Robert Jenrick, the Immigration Minister, has admitted what we all know, that many, probably most, local authorities are at breaking points in terms of the amount of housing and support they're able to give. Those are his words. He said Parliament should have the power to decide how many asylum seekers should be admitted to Britain. But do you even believe that the government can actually do this? They often talk strong, but can they actually back it up? And would you even trust the current bunch of MPs in the Commons to, well, come up with a figure? Let me know what you think. Is it time for an annual cap on the number of refugees allowed to settle in this country? Then Sadiq Khan has found a new way of spending Londoners' money. The mayor wants all state primary school pupils in London to receive free school meals next year. A £130 million scheme paid by, you guessed it, the taxpayer. But of course, the hundreds of millions he'll get robbing London drivers will sort that bill out. That's the ULEZ I'm talking about, of course. But I worry there may be a bit of a moral hazard here. Surely the vast majority of parents in London and across the country should be able to feed their children lunch, but perhaps I'm drastically out of touch. Perhaps you think we should go the whole hog and offer free school meals for every single child in the land. Let me know what you think on that one. And the ASBO, it's back, or at least it could be if Labour get into government. Yes, Yvette Cooper, the Shadow Home Secretary, has pledged to reintroduce a new look ASBO that would allow people to arrest those engaging in antisocial behaviour. Do you think this is necessary to, frankly, get louts and thugs under control, or do you think it's a little sinister and authoritarian? What I do know is that many of our cities and town centres currently feel utterly lawless, and something needs to be done. And lastly, it seems like our entire history is under attack. Do you agree? It's been revealed that Scotland Yard have a secret list of contentious statues prone to attacks. Guess why? Because they have perceived links to war, imperialism, slavery. I want to get your views on that. All of that to come tonight on Dewbs & Co. with me, Emily Carver. But first, let's get the latest news headlines.
Emily, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, in the last half hour, Lancashire Police have confirmed that the body discovered in the River Wyre yesterday has now been formally identified as that of missing mother of two, Nicola Bulley. The body was found a mile away from where Nicola disappeared 3 weeks ago during a morning dog walk. It was found by members of the public. The cause of death has not yet been revealed. A police liaison officer read out a statement on behalf of Nicola's family a short time ago.
Finally, Nikki, you are no longer a missing person. You have been found. We can let you rest now. We love you, always have and always will. We will take it from here.
Well, in other news today, the families of people killed in a shooting spree near Plymouth in 2021 have spoken out against the investigation. 5 people died, including a 3-year-old girl, in a shooting rampage by 22-year-old Jake Davison. Today, the inquest jury said the victims had been unlawfully killed. The inquest heard how Davison legally held a shotgun certificate and had an obsession with firearms. A lawyer for 4 of the victims' families says there's been a catastrophic failure at Devon and Cornwall Police.
The system has hopelessly failed us. In particular, the Devon and Cornwall Police Force has failed us. The evidence we have heard during this inquest over the past 5 weeks is a consistent story of individual failures, breathtaking incompetence and systemic failings within every level of the firearms licensing unit of the Devon and Cornwall Police.
Well, in news away from home, President Biden has promised more than $500 million worth of aid to Ukraine after making a surprise trip to its capital today. That comes just days before the first anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion. Mr. Zelensky said the visit was an extremely important sign of support for all Ukrainians. The US president said his country would stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes.
Putin thought Ukraine was weak and the West was divided. As you know, Mr. President, I said to you in the beginning, he's counting on us not sticking together. He was counting on the inability to keep NATO united. He was counting on us not to be able to bring in others on the side of Ukraine. He thought he could outlast us. I don't think he's thinking that right now. God knows what he's thinking, but I don't think he's thinking that.
Junior doctors in England have voted overwhelmingly to strike for 72 hours next month over pay. The Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says he's deeply disappointed by their decision. The British Medical Association's announcement comes as more than 11,000 healthcare workers from the GMB and Unite unions in England and Wales are striking today in their continuing dispute over pay and staffing. The most dangerous domestic abusers will be added to the sex offenders register as the Home Office vows to treat violence against women as a national threat. The government plans to invest up to £8.4 million over the next 2 years to fund specialist support programmes for victims. Domestic abuse affected around 2.4 million people in England and Wales in the last year. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, says the changes are needed.
I'm changing the law to ensure that there's more robust monitoring of perpetrators. We're introducing measures to ensure that we will be able to tag offenders of domestic abuse, and we will be also adding offenders of domestic abuse onto the violent and sex offenders register. And also, all police chiefs and forces around the country will now be put on a footing to deal with violence against women and girls as a national threat.
The Foreign Secretary has described talks today with the European Commission's Vice President over the Northern Ireland Protocol as productive. This comes as Number 10 denied reports the Prime Minister's been forced to delay announcing a breakthrough amid a backlash from his own MPs. The DUP and backbench Tories say they won't support a deal which retains oversight from the European Court of Justice. But the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said there's a real window of opportunity now to move forward.
The UK and the EU have obviously edged closer together. The question now is whether the Prime Minister is strong enough to get it through his own backbenchers. And what I've said is, on Northern Ireland, the national interest comes first. So we will put party politics to one side. We will vote with the government if there's a deal to vote for. And so the Prime Minister doesn't have to rely on his backbenchers.
Sir Keir Starmer. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Now back now to Dewbs & Co. Here's Emily Carver.
Yes, welcome to Dewbs & Co with me, Emily Carver. I will be standing in for Michelle for the next couple of days. So I'll introduce my panel with me until 7. We have Daniel Moylan, who is a Conservative peer in the House of Lords, and Kevin Craig, a former Labour councillor and the CEO of communications company PLMR. Now, I just very quickly want to get your reaction, really, to the news that the body, well, the worst of all possibilities, the body that was found in the river yesterday is, in fact, the mother, Nicola Bulley.
It's a terrible tragedy, and we can only feel for the family in their loss. And I do believe they should be left alone. I think they've had to go through some pretty horrible stuff. I'd only say that we all make mistakes in life, and I wouldn't want to be quick to beat up Lancashire Police. I think they did some things wrong that are fairly obvious, but they probably were doing their best and a lot of, did a lot of hard work. And I think we should be cool and calm in assessing their performance rather than having any sort of knee-jerk reactions. It's tough for the police too.
Well, that statement from the family was very much a reminder of how much of a circus the media and public can be when it comes to mysterious cases like this. But in some ways, Kevin, the investigation has only just begun.
It's only just begun, and the two things I would say is let's assume down the line it turns out there was no third-party wrongdoing and all feelings go to the family. Number one, there is a case to answer for why it took so long to find the body, very simply. And secondly, my industry, public relations, why did Lancashire Police feel the need to intervene with personal details? That, to me, watching the story very closely, was an example of the force was under pressure and it buckled, and they can't take that back now. That was a PR mistake.
And frankly, the question of why it took over 3 weeks for the body to be discovered. It is a very long time indeed. Please do let me know your thoughts throughout the show on that, of course, but also on the topics that we are going to cover tonight. Please do get in touch with me, gbviews at gbnews.uk, or on Twitter at gbnews. Now, to kick off the show, I want to know whether you think at home that Britain should set an annual cap on how many refugees we are willing to accept. This is because Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick has said he will create safe and legal routes to areas where the UK has a historical or moral obligation, but he said the plans wouldn't allow anyone to apply from anywhere. And he added that many local authorities are at breaking point with the amount of support they're expected to provide. I think that's been clear for rather a long time, particularly if you speak to local councillors who essentially have to find the resources day after day to cope with the numbers, whether it's putting up in hotel accommodation, whether it's putting people up in new homes or social housing, etc. The resources are very much being strained. But is a cap the answer, Kevin?
Well, I'm very attracted by some elements of the announcement, and I think it's a very good idea that Parliament talks about it every year. Last year, I finished 17 years as a councillor in London, and I know that local authorities are at breaking point. So it's very good to see a government minister acknowledging that, and I'm delighted that he's come around to the idea of safe routes, which has been articulated by the Labour Party for quite some time. I think viewers and listeners want to feel it's OK to ask for limits on immigration and asylum without being labelled as racist or extremists. So I think some of this is quite positive.
But Robert Jenrick, the immigration minister, he's made clear that safe and legal routes wouldn't apply to anywhere. And it seems like the Labour Party has presented more of the idea that anyone from anywhere could apply. So it's a different policy, is it not? Robert Jenrick is suggesting being a bit more picky with where you take people from, whereas the Labour Party have been, well, wanted safe and legal routes for people to apply from anywhere.
Well, to a degree, you're right, but the government has not at any stage spoken about safe routes before now. And they, in my opinion, they're only doing that because of a Labour suggestion. Labour is not proposing uncontrolled immigration or asylum. I mean, that's very clear. And I think today's announcement is to be welcomed. He is very specific about countries, Afghanistan, colonialism, Hong Kong, places we've got historical background with. It's mentioned in the piece, Daniel. But I think overall, it's a good idea that every year all MPs of all parties are held to account in Parliament by their constituents as to what they say on it.
Daniel, I can just imagine how many days of debate this would take for MPs, opposition parties, all the different politicians to come up with some kind of magic figure for the amount that Britain can cope with.
I don't think a figure is possible. I think Robert Jenrick is trying to hit several targets with one shot in this. One of them is, not because of Labour pressure, but because there's a logic to it. We have an obligation under the Refugee Convention to take and consider genuine refugees and look after them. And at the moment, it is difficult for them, from many places, to have legal routes for getting into the UK. So some structure needs to be put in place to deal with that. On the other hand, he's trying to say, but that doesn't mean there'll be more refugees than there were before. I think it's hard on the face of it to square those two. We need to see some detail about it. But in general, he's right. The difficulty is that, and that's why it should be specific, by the way, because, you know, refugees coming from sort of countries in the world that are not dangerous to live in, we wouldn't count them as refugees anyway. So we wouldn't have a legal route for refugees coming from the United States, for example. Why would you have a legal route for people coming from Canada? That's not it's not a dangerous place to be. So it will be specific to certain locations. I think that must be right. What really worries people, I think, is in fact not the refugees, the people who are coming under real threat, the people who are displaced, the people whose lives are at risk, but an awful lot of people who appear to be getting here who are looking for a better life, simply. And what they're doing is they're queue jumping, because we don't keep people out who are looking for a better life. We let lots of them in. We allow a lot of immigration into this country for skilled people, for people who are going to come and work in really important things like the NHS, carers and things like that. We allow these people to come in. And what I think upsets people partly is the fact that these people are queue jumping, which doesn't seem fair to us. And then there is, as everybody acknowledges now, this tremendous pressure on local authorities. And where on earth do you put them? Because they've got to be put somewhere decent, or the courts will have a go at you. That means you end up in hotels and God knows what, and it's just not tolerable to an awful lot of people.
What was so frustrating about the conversation, I think it was last week or the week before, when there was that protest in Knowsley, outside the asylum seeker hotel where asylum seekers were staying, was that a lot of the debate in the media and among politicians was about how Suella Braverman's rhetoric about an invasion would be the reason behind this. Little was said about the fact that local authorities are under such severe pressure that many people living in communities around this country may well be thinking, well, hang on, there are hundreds of thousands of people who are homeless in this country. There are many who are at the bottom of the social housing list, the waiting lists, waiting for their own accommodation. And it's hardly surprising that there's a resentment brewing, is it?
Well, I think we have to be very careful not to condone in any way the actions of the violent thugs who attacked our police in Knowsley. I think what's more powerful and more interesting, and it's the first thing that Jacob Rees-Mogg has said for ages, I agreed with today, where he said, well, you know, the last 13 years, you know, housing, we haven't got a grip on housing, we haven't dealt with it. And it's, yes, mate, you've been in government, OK? You said it on this channel, this very channel 2 hours ago, hosted by, indeed, you know, by people we know well. And I thought, yes, that's why it can breed resentment and frustration. People who've been waiting on the list for years, who perceive they've been queue jumped, no wonder they get fed up.
Well, quite. And you could say this is government failure. They haven't planned ahead in terms of how much housing they should have, how much we need. But then it does beg the question also, is it possible for a country to build as many houses as we need?
Yeah, it is possible to build it, and the select committee I chair in the House of Lords did a report on what the obstacles are that haven't been addressed. It is possible to build more housing. But there are lots and lots of structural problems, and they don't all lie with the government. And one of them, of course, is that people don't want housing in their backyard. They don't want new housing in their backyard, even if it's, you know, for their children and grandchildren. They wouldn't necessarily want it. So they haven't bought that argument. Kevin seems confident when I speak to him privately that there's going to be a Labour government, and why he thinks that. But he thinks there's going to be a Labour government, and good luck to Labour, because they can come out and tell us if we haven't solved the housing problem, who they're going to annoy by solving the housing problem.
Well, one of the reasons I like Daniel is that he's actually done...
One of the many.
He's done real big jobs in politics, right? Before he was in the House of Lords, he was very, very important in London government. So he's been there and done that. He's got housing schemes through, he's made a difference. And yes, Labour, if they did have the privilege of governing after the next election, no, they have to unlock housing in this country. Politicians of all sides say, if you try and build anywhere so that people on normal incomes, their families can live in the same area, up come the objectors. It's a nightmare. You know, it's so difficult.
But I will say, because a lot of people sitting at home will be thinking, I don't want more housing going up, regardless of who it's there to house. There are a lot of people in this country who are fed up of development after development. They're fed up of the pressure on infrastructure, be it on the NHS or local transport and whatnot. There are so many pressures, school places, etc., and constantly local councils are being asked to house, feed, school, transport people who have arrived without them even knowing. This is the reality of being a local councillor these days, is that you're told by the Home Office you're getting X amount of people. Yeah. The next day they arrive and suddenly they're supposed to fund it all.
But on the housing question, which is where you started, OK, it would be the challenge for the next government of whatever party to do it and not just talk about it, OK?
Well, there's a lot of that in government as a whole. I mean, the chances of us actually having a cap are probably slim to none. But I do think it would focus attention on a matter that is, well, hugely frustrating, as we can see from the inbox here. Christopher has said, if the government was serious about illegal immigration, it would have taken the UK out of the ECHR years ago. A cap is yet another meaningless gimmick floated for PR reasons. I think it is, because, as Daniel said, we are part of the UN Refugee Convention, and that means that we can't really simply have a cap on numbers, an arbitrary cap anyway. Peter says, to cap immigration, you need to be able to control the numbers. At the moment, we have no control over the numbers, so capping is just rhetoric. It does seem, Daniel, that no one trusts anything the government says on this issue.
Or the Labour Party, for that matter.
No.
Politicians... I mean, obviously, they trust what people in the House of Lords say. That's another matter, of course. Respect for those. But, no, it is very difficult. It's out of our hands. I'm surprised that I haven't seen the government actually do something more dramatic. I mean, we're now 6 weeks on, is it, since Rishi made his great speech setting out the 5 goals, one of which was to deal with small boats. But I think it's important to separate these issues anyway. Small boats is one thing. Yeah. Genuine refugees is another thing. Yeah. We should have legal routes for genuine refugees to come here. But, of course, the purpose of what we do when they come here is to establish they're genuine refugees.
Yes.
And that needs to be established, and then we have some responsibility for them.
No, I think you're right.
We don't have a responsibility for them if they're not genuine refugees. Legally, we don't.
But because of the state of what's going on in the Channel, it's hard to separate the issues in people's minds.
I know.
Because people feel like the borders are completely porous at the moment. Anyway, thank you very much for sending in all of your comments. Lots of you have been telling me, well, perhaps what the cap could be. So please do keep them coming. Do you think there should be a cap on the number of asylum seekers Britain accommodates every year? Coming up, we're going to be talking about the London Mayor. He's going to give free school meals to every primary school child, but should we go further, perhaps, and bring it in nationwide? Let me know.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
All right, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Emily Carver, this evening. Now, lots of you have been getting in touch. The inbox is very much full on the question of whether we should have a cap, an annual cap, on the number of asylum seekers Britain accommodates. We have Joyce here. Joyce says, these people coming across the Channel are not asylum seekers. They are, in fact, illegal immigrants, which is very different. Please do not try to mislead us. These people have not applied for asylum. Well, once you arrive in this country, you can legally apply for asylum. But of course we do, as Daniel was saying, we do need to differentiate between economic migrants and asylum seekers and genuine refugees. Richard says, no need for a cap. Rishi is going to stop all the boats. That will be a natural cap. Well, Richard has faith in the Prime Minister to do so. He has promised to do that. So the proof will be in the pudding, or whether those boats continue to come across the Channel. Angela says the government should have called time on immigration years ago. We have no control and we are angry at the government for putting our safety at risk. Call time on all immigration. That sounds a little bit authoritarian, Angela, there. And Karen says the question is totally irrelevant. The government will never listen to us, even if we were 100% in favour. Well, there you go, damning stuff. Now we're going to be moving on to Sadiq Khan, who I do love to hate. Sadiq Khan has searched down the back of his, or your sofa, and found £130 million to provide free school meals for every primary school pupil in London in the next academic year. I don't think there's any surprise that this comes after all the heat he's been taking over the ULEZ expansion, which of course will take £12.50 out of everyone's pockets if they choose to drive in Greater London. Anyway, this one-off funding will begin in September and help families save about £440 per child. Now, some people have been calling for us to go even further and roll out such a scheme nationwide. Let me know what you think. But first, I want to know what Daniel thinks.
Well, it's a fantastic distraction, isn't it, from his current difficulties, as you rightly say. It's for 1 year only. In an election year, because, of course, it'll start in September and he has elections halfway through the academic year, starting, I think, in September is probably what it sounds like. And he'll be right in the middle there, and he's basically trying to buy your vote. He's obviously desperate. He's obviously terribly worried about holding on for a third term, so we have him for 12 years. And obviously even he realises that's a very, very hard sell.
May I just interrupt you just to say, he says it's 1 year only, but once you give a benefit, it's very hard to then take it back without seeming, well, evil and heartless.
Well, he'll just have to seem evil and heartless once he's re-elected. It depends, I suppose, whether he wants a fourth term or not. But at the moment, it's for 1 year only, and he's absolutely clear about that. No, cards on the table. I don't have children, so I wouldn't actually benefit from this, if I comment on it. But I worry about it, not because of the cost. Of course, there's a cost, and it's coming out of our pockets. Not because of that, but because it's a further shift in the balance between responsibility for children, between the state and the parent. And I think we have to live in a free society. Parents have to have a sense of responsibility for their own children, and they have to be able to feed them. We give free school meals to people who are entitled to them as a result of their circumstances. I don't see why they should be given to people who we don't assess as being entitled to them because of their circumstances. And I think it really is a really worrying undermining of parental responsibility.
Well, I mean, I understand that argument, but do you, Kevin, do you think there is a moral hazard in expecting the state, essentially, to pay for your children to eat?
No, I don't.
Not at all?
No. Well, two things. First of all, I noticed you opened the programme today, and which shows how much we listen to the hosts on the show.
Thank you.
You said Sadiq Khan robbing drivers, and then you've just said, I love to hate him. What's the problem?
With Sadiq Khan?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I could mention many things. One of the things, for example, that I despise was his commission for diversity in the public realm, which was essentially gave Sadiq Khan the right to judge the statues that we have in our capital and deem whether they are diverse and inclusive enough. And I found that ever so slightly Orwellian. I also don't like the fact that taxes seem to rise every month under Sadiq Khan. I hate the ULEZ Greater London expansion. It's totally undemocratic. He has public consultations and then doesn't listen to the answer unless it's the one he wants. I could go on.
OK, so...
I don't like the way he pontificates about Trump.
Well, I think I know Sadiq. I dealt with him a lot when I was elected in London. He's a great mayor. I think what he said on Trump was fantastic. I saw you and Daniel enjoying seeing President Biden today compared to what we used to have leading the leader of the free world. Sadiq Khan on ULEZ, I think he's having to listen, and I think there's a big debate there, and I think people are starting to have an impact, and I think they might extend the compensation for that scheme. And I have no issue. There are kids going to bed hungry in the capital as well as elsewhere. This is a very, very progressive move. You are right to say, well, how won't it be difficult to take away this free school funding? Well, you know, let's see how it goes. It's designed to have a big hit. Over the long term, policies on free school meals, I agree, you don't want well-off families getting this money. But I had free school meals. They were really important when my family was poor. And so I think this is a great thing the mayor has done, and he should be applauded for it.
So you don't want... you don't want well-off families to get this money. But that's the whole point. At the moment, they don't. And poorer families do, or they get not the money for the free school meals, they get the remission. And this is giving it to everybody, including millionaires. Now, you just said you don't want to see that happen. Do you understand what you're talking about, Kevin?
Well,
have you read the article?
Yes, I have. And so the issue is, over the long term, if you want to do something quickly, sometimes you do risk those who don't need it getting the money. But there's an emergency going on. There are kids hungry. I mean, unless you two would like to disagree with me about that.
There are kids who are hungry whose parents can afford to feed them.
And there are some who are hungry whose parents can't.
Yeah, but they would get free school meals already. So the question is, are we focusing? Because what this is about is giving free school meals, not to every primary school kid, but giving free school meals to every primary school kid whose parents can afford them. That is, who are well off enough. It's a middle-class benefit, you understand that? So this is a middle-class benefit. This is not for the poor. The poor are catered for already. Are you really comfortable with that? I mean, maybe you are. Maybe you are. Maybe this is Islington speaking.
Well, no, I mean, Islington, I barely know, but thank you for that.
You see what I mean?
But do you not prefer it to remain means-tested?
In an ideal world, but there's an emergency going, which is why he's reacting. The emergency is hungry kids.
Because
yes.
I think.
Do you doubt that as well,
this is my
Emily?
theory.
Oh,
I think it is in Sadiq Khan's interests to go on the media and say that every child in this great nation's capital is struggling to eat. Every family out there is unable to afford to feed their child lunch, because then he can go into the pockets of every Londoner, pinch them more taxes. He says this is going to be paid for by business rates, and then be Santa Claus. And every time you do something like this, people become more and more dependent on the government. And the money doesn't come from anywhere. It comes from the taxpayer.
Well, this specific measure comes from a surplus in business rates. And the way, I think, in all due fairness, that you characterise Sadiq Khan as some pantomime villain hopping around, I don't think that's particularly fair. And I think it attributes a cynicism to him, which is not his motive. Of course, all candidates for mayor, and Daniel was crucial to Boris Johnson's success in London, and forgive me, but for Daniel to point out that this is a stunt in the run-up to election is probably because he's got experience of seeing that from the other side, working with Boris.
No idea.
Right, no idea what I'm talking about.
That means, Kevin.
Right? So
this is not a stunt, it's a bribe.
Well,
of the middle classes.
It is a bribe, yes.
I really don't understand why you keep going on about this emergency, but the money is going to well-off families. Is that what you want?
It's a 1 year. So to be specific, it's a 1 year measure designed to reflect the fact that there are families where children are going hungry who are not the traditional people on the poverty line. We either agree that that's happening in London, or we don't. I don't think Sadiq Khan is saying for one moment that every child in London is hungry. That would be, I humbly suggest, ridiculous.
Well, I think it's very easy for him to take with one hand and give with another, because some people seem to think that money grows on trees and it doesn't actually, get recycled around for all of these causes, from our pockets, from our tax bills to others. Anyway, lots of you who have been getting in touch with this, whether we should have free school meals for every primary school child across the nation. Valerie says, why should children get any free meals? Families receive family allowance. This should be used. If they do get free meals, then family allowances should be reduced. Well, we are sort of approaching this conversation without mentioning that, of course, there are many benefits available to parents. Stuart says, I genuinely do not understand why the taxpayer has to now stump up even more to feed kids at school. Why do parents get child benefit if not to go towards feeding their children? Again, making that point. And who do I want to go to now? Tim says, no free school meals. Governments want to make us more dependent on them so they have more control, bit by bit. I do genuinely feel like there's a bit of truth to that.
Yeah.
If you can look like the superhero.
Yeah. No, it is. It's very much, it's the Gordon Brown view of politics, which many Labour politicians have bought into and followed. They grew up in his shadow. They even speak warmly of him, but it was very much the Gordon Brown thing, that the state is really responsible for everything. And we'll let you get on in the little bit of your private life that we don't want to intervene in. I
mean, I do think a lot of middle-class people would prefer to have less taxes than welfare.
Well, school meals are horrible anyway.
If you want to poll,
well, that's a good point. School meals are horrible anyway.
Why do you want to put this?
The middle class, I think the
beneficiaries
working class,
of this.
Hang on. I think at the moment, all socioeconomic groups in our country have the same priorities, and they come down to, health, education, defence, crime.
And free school meals.
And yes, children not going hungry. It's very popular, this policy, by the way.
OK, well, we're going to have to move on, but please do keep sending in your views. Some of these are very amusing indeed. But coming up, Labour again is getting tough with a new and improved ASBO. Is the famous antisocial behaviour order the cure to petty crime?
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
As a guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewbs, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Yes, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Emily Carver. Let me reintroduce my wonderful panel. Daniel Moyland is a Conservative peer in the House of Lords, and Kevin Craig, former Labour councillor and the CEO of communications company PLMR, and an avid cyclist.
Yes.
Which is what I found out. So we're getting so many comments on the free school meals. I just wanted to read out one before we move on to the next topic. Darren says, yes, let's give free school meals to every child for the next 20 years. Throw in breakfast as well. In fact, let's buy lunch for everyone up to the age of 28. Yes, well, it does seem like the government and politicians like Steve Khan are very willing to splash the cash, but do they remember that it's not their cash to splash? I'm not so sure. Anyway, Labour is continuing to make its pitch to the electorate, this time with a familiar idea, a toughened-up ASBO. The antisocial behaviour order was introduced by Tony Blair, if you remember, in 1998 to clamp down on petty crime. Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper's proposed respect order sounds a bit nicer, doesn't it? They framed it in a nicer way. Would have stronger enforcement powers, though, and if violated, could lead to the culprit's arrest. Daniel, I think you're a bit soft on this one, aren't you? You think they're a bad idea?
I've always thought ASBOs are a really bad idea because they're terribly, as I say, Gordon Brown all over them. You don't have to bother proving that somebody's done anything wrong. You don't need to bother with the trial. You don't need to bother with evidence or anything like that. You can just slap these orders on people, and then if they contravene them, you can put them in jail. I don't know what it means to say it comes with the power of arrest. At the moment, if somebody breaches an ASBO, you can actually arrest them. So first of all, I don't think they're offering very much. And secondly, I think it's regrettable that all they're doing is knee-jerk stuff that doesn't work, when what they should be doing, I'd have hoped from the Labour Party, with its strong tradition of thinking carefully about social issues, would actually come up with some ideas that might work for everybody, including the people who are committing these offences.
Yes, it does.
Because they might be diverted from them.
It does feel like essentially a rebrand of something we've already had. But I must say, Kevin, I had the displeasure of walking in the evening around a certain area of London, I won't name where, and it felt lawless. There were groups of essentially yobs, louts, hooligans even, just standing around, loitering, breaking out into fights. I wouldn't be surprised if someone had got seriously harmed. London and other city centres around the country, town centres, can feel incredibly scary, frightening places.
Yeah, and this policy announcement is partly a response to that and to reflect that people feel increasingly unsafe. They feel there's an issue about police numbers. They feel that, you know, lawlessness, law breaking is higher than it used to be. And I like this policy and I like what Yvette Cooper does because crime, in my personal experience, disproportionately affects the poorest and the working classes. There's like the estates I grew up on in Lambeth and South London, where people suffer the most from lawlessness, a lack of respect. And as Bose, the big picture is from 1995 to 2010, you know, violent crime, for example, went down by 49%. The British Crime Survey measures this every year. So there is, and I'm trying not to make a political point, I'm just saying Labour does feel very strongly about law and order and how it affects our poorest communities.
Are you talking about crime, Kevin, or are you talking about what you refer to as lawlessness? Because if people commit crimes, what we normally do is prosecute them and punish them.
Yeah.
ASBOs are not about crime. They're about what Emily was talking about. She went down a street and she sees a bunch of poor kids, they're mostly poor kids, standing around in groups. Now, is that something, poor kids standing around in
breaking
groups,
out into fights,
that you should be, that you should want to say, I can go around slapping orders on those people not to stand around in the street because I find it threatening? Is that in a free society? Well, because that's what this is about.
Well,
just like before you were got it all muddled up. I'm trying to help you clarify your thinking here. What this is about is not about crime. We have a procedure for dealing with crime.
Well,
this
do
is
we,
about,
though? Because...
Well, this won't... Look, if we don't catch a criminal and convict him, we're not going to catch him with an ASBO. So this isn't about that. This is about what they call antisocial behaviour. It says it on the can. It's what you call lawlessness, and Kevin has talked about crime and lawlessness, and he acknowledges they're different. This is about lawlessness. Now, often that comes down to people from housing estates hanging around on the streets. Is that something that we should be... You're happy to put an ASBO on? Are you, Kevin?
Let me
That's where you stand on this?
No. Now, I'm going to suggest that possibly I might have more of an affinity with that group than you do, Daniel, and I might have been one of those kids hanging around in groups on estates.
Yeah, you should have been slapped with an ASBO.
Nobody is talking...
sorted him out.
Nobody is talking about slapping ASBOs on young people. Hang on. About young people hanging around not doing anything or threatening anybody. But there is an issue over time in this country about the small things that, you know, the antisocial behaviour, threatening behaviour, you know, throwing litter on the street, a lack of respect for others.
It's for litter now.
Hang on.
Hang on, let Kevin finish, Daniel.
Let me finish. So, you know, I feel that this policy strikes a chord with people because people, you know, this country is a fabulous place and people want to feel safe. This is not about persecuting young people from hanging around, playing out, being together, but it is about law and order and safety.
It is predominantly about young people, isn't it?
But I think...
It is predominantly about young people. ASBOs are predominantly given to young people, poor people, black people. That's all OK with you. That's the target audience.
But,
Let's be clear about it.
But does that matter if those groups are...
It doesn't matter.
Disproportionately represented in antisocial behaviour cases, then fine.
Or are they disproportionately represented as receiving ASBOs? And that's why we know that they're... I think Kevin needs to really think in his conscience here what the effect of this is. He knows that this is recycled nonsense that doesn't work. And he's doing a good job trying to defend it, but it doesn't work.
Go on then, Kevin, I'll give you one more shot.
Well, I don't need a shot because I think, you know, a neutral person knows that the people in this country are worried about crime, right? And it's not recycled. It's in response to escalating crime rates and people not thinking that the police have got the resources to do their jobs. And it comes from a party who, from 95 to 2010, reduced violent crime by 49%, said the British Crime Survey. So it's based on a track record.
Well, there we go. I'll let our viewers at home decide whether they think the ASBO should make a comeback. I'm not sure if people believe it will do much good. It might be even worn as a badge of honour by some louts and hooligans. Anyway, after the break, we'll reveal which famous figures from Britain's history are in the Met Police's list of contentious statues in central London. Stay tuned.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yes, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Emily Carver. Now, we're going to be having a little look at history, or the Metropolitan Police, who have made a list of so-called contentious statues in central London, and whether this is an attack on British history, or whether we're seeing an attack on British history. Why are these statues being included in a contentious list that requires the police to, well, treat them especially and look at them? We've got lots of statues here. Statues of Winston Churchill is included, Oliver Cromwell, Earl Mountbatten of Burma, Nelson's Column, and even the cenotaph, which, of course, is the centrepiece at many a Remembrance Sunday. Now, Daniel, this is a pretty, well, damning example of how British history has become so contentious, and the police are having to draw up lists.
Well, it's proper that the police should draw up lists of places that are being, or things that are being targeted by these violent left-wing characters. What's so unpleasant, though, is participating in this rewriting of history that is always determined to cast Britain and Britain's history as being evil, that we have always benefited from white privilege, that we should be ashamed of our history, when in fact, like most countries, there's most of what we did, like many countries, much of what we did is something to be really proud of. And although people always make mistakes, there are things that you would have done better. And this is a very deliberate campaign by people who want to eradicate our history and change the way we see ourselves. And in the course of it, depress us and make us miserable, if nothing else. So we should stand up and actually say it's wrong.
So we should protect our own statues.
The police have made the mistake, not simply of giving a list of places that could be a typical PR disaster. Not simply by making a list of vulnerable places, which is a perfectly legitimate thing for them to do. You should know in advance if somewhere is going to be targeted. But actually adding quotes to try and explain why, as if they too believed that, Gandhi, for example, was rude about black people. So why do they have to explain that? Why don't they just say this statue is under threat, we need to give some special protection to it?
Well, I'm sure you remember that in the heat of the Black Lives Matter movement, there were lists being drawn up by people of statues and monuments across the country that should be targeted. So I guess it's right for the police to highlight, at least in their own books, of course this came out because of a Freedom of Information request, but to highlight which statues need extra protection.
Yes, but I think it's important that to say, you know, people that I know, left and right-wing in politics, when they saw Winston Churchill's statue being defaced by protesters, you know, I was outraged, OK, that happened in the past by people, because without that man, we wouldn't all have the freedom to be sitting here tonight and disagreeing with each other. But the reality is, and we have to be careful sometimes, the number of people who actually want to pull down these statues is a minority in our country, because I think most people appreciate, you know, this fantastic nation is a product of its past. My family are all from Ireland originally. They're all Catholics. Every time I go in and out of Parliament for work or politics, I see Oliver Cromwell up there. You know, I don't want to tear him down. He's part of how we got here.
You know, get your torch out, your pitchfork.
Precisely, you know, but history's bigger than that. And I think this is a PR disaster.
But you're a very sensible man, Kevin. But Daniel, I worry about what children are being taught in schools and what they're seeing, because I worry about having children. I worry I'll be going down to the school every day to complain about what I see on their curriculum, because it seems constantly they're being taught, well, that British history is very much negative. It always seems to be taught in a negative light. Talking about decolonising curriculum, which to me means getting rid of anything written by a white man. All sorts. The list could go on.
I'm terrified about what children are being taught, and there's this huge disjunction that exists now between the university graduate, middle-class types, who, of course, university graduates supply our teaching profession. That's where they come from, university. The university graduate teaching types, and what the vast majority of ordinary people in this country think. And I think that many parents would be horrified if they realised what nonsense, dangerous nonsense, their children are sometimes being taught. And I think it's only going to get worse, but I have no solution for it, because I don't know what, apart from saying children should just stop going to school because it's too dangerous for their upbringing. And that would be a bit dramatic, Kevin, even I admit. That would be a bad look. See you looking a bit surprised there. Apart from that, I can't think what to do.
But is this just the consequence and something we have to accept, that in a diverse country, multi-ethnic, multiracial, with people from every different background under the sun, that people are going to get upset and offended by what they see, or by Britain's history, or by the history of the person living next to them. And that somehow you need to just say, the government or whoever needs to just say, well, yes, you might be offended, and so what? Right.
It's important that I inject a slightly different perspective to you two on your worries and fears about what's happening in schools. OK? In schools across the country, there is some great education being delivered. Over time, curricula, whatever the plural is in Latin, they develop and change to reflect evolving thought. I think sometimes I fear that we overblow the fear around critical teaching of our history, because this is a magnificent country. I'm really proud of it. But in our journey to be here, some bad things happened. And now they're talked about more openly in curriculums than they were 100 years ago.
Kevin, I fear you're much more sensible than some of the people who are activists in the teaching industry. Industry, if you call that. Teaching profession. Yeah. Teaching profession. Some of them really do want to infiltrate young minds with Marxist nonsense. Anyway, Emily, I must read. We've only got, a minute less than a minute left. Michelle says, our statues will be fine. Labour are bringing back scary ASBOs. Well, there you go. That will stop people attacking our wonderful statues. David says, simply leave our statues alone. Thank you very much. That is all we have time for this evening. I've had the wonderful Daniel Moylan with me today, and Kevin Maguire with me as well.
Not Kevin Maguire, Kevin Craig, that's the other one.
Kevin Craig, I'm terribly sorry.
No problem, Susan.
What a terrible finish to a wonderful show. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. Well, tomorrow is going to be a dry day for many, with a few sunny spells around and remaining still quite mild. Now, most of this settled weather is due to this high pressure that's still around across most of England and Wales. Though looking further north, we have got some weather fronts that try to push in through Monday and into the start of Tuesday, just bringing us some outbreaks of rain and drizzle to end the day. There will be some outbreaks of light rain and drizzle, mostly over western upslopes as well. well through this evening. Otherwise, it's going to be a dry night, quite cloudy though, so temperatures are going to be remaining pretty mild once again, with little to no frost around for the start of Tuesday. There's going to be another cloudy start to the day tomorrow, little in the way of brightness to start the day, with outbreaks of rain continuing across the far north of Scotland, and these could be heavy at times. With a freshening breeze as well, it's going to be feeling pretty cool here in the wind. Though with the cloudy skies elsewhere and limited brightness, it will be quite a mild day elsewhere, with temperatures generally sticking around in the double figures. But looking to Tuesday evening and into the start of Wednesday, and it's all changed with this band of rain making its way south and eastwards. And this marks a change to some slightly cooler conditions. So that rain will make its way southeastwards through Tuesday night and into the start of Wednesday. So remaining generally dry to start, but cloudy ahead of this, with some rain building in towards the early hours of Wednesday. Behind this, though, blustery showers and clear spells moving in, which means we could just see a patchy grass frost to start Wednesday here. That rain will continue to make its way south and eastwards throughout the start of Wednesday, bringing some outbreaks of rain. These will mostly be light, but we could just see the odd moderate one in there as well. Behind this, though, brightening skies, freshening breeze, though, with some showers too that could be wintry over high ground. Continued through the rest of the week, though, that we'll see some bright spells and some outbreaks of rain, but temperatures getting cooler.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoon.